That sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good.
All right. Hopefully you got the part of beginning at verse 7. I thought this was a very good illustration the writer of Hebrews made. For the earth drinketh in the rain that cometh off of it, and bringeth forth herbs to meat, or suitable for them whom it is dressed, receiving blessings from God. But that which beareth thorns and briars is rejected, and nigh unto cursing, whose end is to be burned. So in other words, just as fruit bears when the rain pours on the ground and God's ordained it to come up, so it is in the lives of believers. Once we're saved, we begin to bear fruit. And that should be the normal life of any believer. There should be some fruit. How much? Only God knows, and only that believer who's striving to use all their gifts. And then after the difficult part there of the first 7 verses, verse 9, I love, changes the tone a bit. Beloved, but we are persuaded better of things of you and things that accompany salvation. And though we thus speak. For God is not unrighteous to forget your work and labor of love, which ye have showed toward his name, which ye have ministered to the saints, and do minister. And we desire that every one of you do show the same diligence to the full assurance of hope unto the end, that ye be not slothful, but followers of them, through faith and patience, inherit the promises. For when God made promises to Abraham, because he could swear by no greater, he swore by himself. Obviously, there was no higher authority for God to say, oh, I promise by, so he swore by himself and promised Abraham the blessing we're all familiar with in verse 14, saying, surely I will bless thee, and multiplying, I will multiply thee. And of course, God did just that. And so after he had patiently endured, he obtained the promise. And remember, there was some endurance and some patience and things that Abraham had to go through. And we know that as in the New Testament, Abraham believed God, and it was accounted unto him for righteousness. So it was the same prerequisite, faith or belief in God. For men verily swear by the greater. And an oath for confirmation is to them an end of all strife, wherein God, willing more abundantly to show unto the heirs of the promise of the immutability of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath, that by 2 immutable things, in the which it was impossible for God to lie, we might have a strong consolation, who have fled for refuge to lay hold upon the hope set before us, which hope we have an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which entereth into that within the veil. Again, I think the writer of Hebrews demonstrates his great knowledge and Holy Spirit inspired knowledge of the Old Testament, when the veil in the New Testament, when the veil was rent, and what was behind the veil in the Old Testament. Whether the forerunner is for us entered, even Jesus, made a high priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. So we talked a little bit about Melchizedek, and now the writer of Hebrews is going to talk even more about him, and studying this more and more. Personally, I have uncovered some things that I didn't realize before that might be a key into understanding. Remember some of the theories about Melchizedek and how some of those are difficult scriptures concerning Melchizedek. He's mentioned back in the book of Genesis as the king of Salem or Jerusalem. Also, he's called the king of righteousness. Of him, it says, and I have a new speculation on this, having no father, no mother, no beginning of days, and no end. So a lot of believers have surmised over the past couple thousand years, this must have been a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. Who else has no beginning, no end, no mother, no father, and someone that Abraham, the father of faith, would pay tithes to. So after he spends the time of those first verses warning about, the dangers of falling away, and why it was important to stay close. And there were consequences if the fruit of the ground doesn't bring up useful fruit and bears thorns and briars. We cut it down and we burn it, or we get rid of them somehow. It's rejected. But then the writer of Hebrews changes gears a little bit, and almost like he come to the realization he might have been a little harsher than he needed to be. But beloved, we are confident of better things for you, things that accompany salvation. Please keep in mind these were Hebrew Christians that were much more comfortable in Judaism than they were in Christianity, or what they called the way. So they kept kind of wanting to slip back into that, and again, make Christianity a side part of Judaism rather than its own thing, which was totally different and totally new. They had the tendency to do that. Brandy.
On the world around them, Nero was persecuting Christians as well. So
Yes.
it wasn't a fancy thing, desirable thing to be Christian.
Yes, absolutely. They were being persecuted already, and so it was nothing that you really bragged about. So he says, don't be discouraged. God hasn't forgotten you. He's not unjust to forgive your work of love that you did in the past and the work of love that you do now. So we hope that each one of you show the same diligence and full assurance of hope unto the end. So he's kind of like, in my opinion, coaching or urging believers to, carry on. And, who doesn't need that every once in a while? Who doesn't need a spiritual pat on the back or some encouragement? And I know God gives each one of us that in our own way and in different times. Maybe you've experienced that too. That when you needed encouragement, it comes from maybe a source you didn't expect, but it encourages you. It helps us, and God's good at that. The writer of Hebrews uses the word, don't become sluggish. And I think we all know what that means. Let's not be discouraged that we, might want to give up or lose the desire to press on, desire to go forth. The Apostle Paul, of course, said the Christian faith was a race, and it was a race to be won. And that oftentimes we need to press on past the pain, press on past, in this case, the persecution, personal challenges. A lot of Jewish people around these Hebrew Christians were telling them not to follow after this new fad, but just to stay entrenched in Judaism. Say, hey, it was good enough for our fathers, it's good enough for us. Why change it? And then the immutable promises of God, the fact the Bible is clear that God cannot lie, and that when God swears an oath, you can count on it. We probably all know of someone when they give you their word, their solemn word, that that they're going to keep that. Well, the ultimate keeper of his word is God. It may not seem like it sometimes, it may take him a while, but he does keep his word. So the writer of Hebrews says, God could swear by no greater. So he told Abraham, I'll make of thee a great nation. I'll multiply you. And in multiplying, I'll even multiply your multiplying. That's what that verse means. And of course, those that blessed Israel, he blessed. And those that cursed Israel, he cursed. Something interesting, my wife and I were watching I think it's a relatively new series. There's different episodes called The House of David. And, we're following along in our hearts to make sure that it's staying with the Bible. Even though at the beginning it says, some things have been altered to speculate what might have happened in between. The Bible hits topics kind of like skims it. And anyways, we're watching, and I had forgotten that after David killed Goliath, one of David's mighty men killed Goliath's brother. Do you remember his name? Belly. It almost sounds like Baal, or son of Belial. But he saw David on the battlefield, and he started to rush to David to avenge his brother Goliath. And it says he also was of the giants of Gath, and one of David's mighty men intercepted him and killed him. From that time on, they said, David, you just can't go out to battle anymore. You're not as young as you were, and if you get killed, the light of Israel will go out. So from then on, David was spared that. I thought that was interesting as we're watching that. So God gives us consolation. Matter of fact, God gives us strong consolation. Charles Spurgeon describes some of the characteristics of strong consolation as it doesn't depend upon our health. Strong consolation doesn't depend on the excitement of public services, people giving you an attaboy. Strong consolation can't be shaken if someone tries to use human reasoning to tell you why your faith is wrong or our faith is wrong. And strong consolation is stronger than any guilty conscience. So I thought that was good. Then he begins to end this chapter by saying, who have fled for refuge to lay hold on the hope that is set before us. I love that. What a refuge. He uses the refuge. He uses the word anchor. What an anchor we have for our soul. And as I think I said last Sunday, probably an anchor, as we all know, holds a boat in place. The whole purpose of it is to go down and keep the boat from drifting off. Jesus and the cities of refuge are easily within reach of anybody in need. It's open to all. Jesus provides full freedom, and he became the new high priest. So he ends by saying in this chapter, don't be discouraged. Jesus will lead us into God's glory. We don't have to worry about that. The law did a good job of setting standards and showing us what we did wrong, what people did wrong. But it didn't enable people to do it. The new covenant did that, which is why the new covenant had to come. Why do I say that? Because we're going to find out here in this next chapter that Melchizedek and the priestly order of Jesus is an integral part of the New Testament and New Covenant. Melchizedek was not of the same tribe as Jesus. He was not of the tribe of Aaron. He was not a Levite. It's as if the best they can piece together from what little is mentioned of him is he was a Canaanite who somehow came and believed in the one true God. And then all of a sudden he appears, and we'll hopefully go over that tonight, in the book of Genesis, and now we're finding out about him in Hebrews. So let's go. Verse 20 of chapter 6 ends, whether the forerunner for us is entered, even Jesus made a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Let's go right into chapter 7. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. This happened when Abraham was going to rescue Lot. The men had come in after Lot had chosen the well-fertile land and got captured and taken by a group of kings. Abraham went and rescued him and brought Lot back, his son-in-law. That's what verse 1's about. To whom also Abraham gave a 10th part of all. Please remember, in hindsight, this was before the law of tithing. This was before the Mosaic Law. This is all the way back to the book of Genesis. So Abraham tithed a 10th to Melchizedek, who's called the king of Salem and king of righteousness, which is what verse 2 says, king of peace, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a 10th of the spoils. And verily they that are of the sons of Levi, who receive the office of the priesthood, have a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law, that is, of their brethren, though they come out of the loins of Abraham. This gets a little deep here. For he whose descent is not counted from them received tithes of Abraham and blessed him that had the promises. And without all contradiction, the less is blessed of the better. And here men that die receive tithes, but there he receiveth them of whom it is witnessed that he liveth. And as I might say, Levi also, who received tithes, paid tithes in Abraham. Well, how did he do that? Verse 10. For he was yet in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Talk about a God of multi-generations. Talk about a God who knows what our ancestors did, and I believe and knows what our future kin will do. While he was yet in the loins of Abraham, Levi tithed to Melchizedek. So this Melchizedek is a new, greater covenant. I don't necessarily agree with this or disagree, but one commentator puts it this way, and I don't think God is like this. It's as if God almost couldn't wait for Jesus to come, so he gave us this. There's a word used here that is the only time in the whole Bible it's used that Melchizedek was a reasonable or a perfect facsimile, a copy of Jesus. And that could very well explain why he's referred to as having no mother, no father, no beginning, no end. Or he could have been a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. Verse 11, if therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek, and not called after the order of Aaron? For the priesthood being changed, there is made a necessity, a change also of the law. For he of whom these things were spoken pertaineth to another tribe, of which no man gave attendance to the altar. For it's evident that our Lord sprang out of Judah, of which tribe Moses spake nothing concerning priesthood. And it is yet far more evident that after the similitude of Melchizedek, there ariseth another priest, who is made not after the law of carnal commandment, but after the power of endless life. For he testifieth, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Let's stop there. That's a lot. That's a lot. Let me